Welcome to Revolution of Purpose, a podcast series with Tracy and Kova. We are excited to bring to you today an episode about Kova and how life shifted for her after the 36-day water fast, which was incredibly transformative.
It's been 8 years since then, as I continue to study consciousness and understand what I was experiencing. If you have questions on the 36-day water fast, I encourage you to write them. We can create entire episodes around additional questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. So before we move on from the water fast, you were saying that you actually overfasted for 3 days.
Yeah.
And that there were some ramifications from that.
There were definitely ramifications on that.
What was the after fast process like, health-wise and then also mental health-wise?
Well, it was interesting. You know, all of the research was really on the fast itself. And what I didn't know is that post-fast was as important as the fast itself. And none of the research, and I did lots and lots of research on it, really indicated that. I actually ended up setting up a call with a gentleman who's based out of Costa Rica, who actually has his own fasting retreat center. And he puts people on a very specific fruitarian diet that titrates them back into being able to eat again. And I did nothing like that at all. And I actually started going from extreme highs, so extreme states of unconditional love like I was experiencing on the fast, to extreme states of I absolutely hate myself. And I'm not sure if the suicidal ideation became super present yet, but it did at some point. I started going through these extreme highs and lows on a daily basis. I created my own version of an eating disorder afterwards, which was I would binge for hours and hours and hours at a time, drop almost $100 a day just on eating all these different foods, and then fast until I was hungry again. I would repeat the cycle over and over and over again.
And so I'm guessing this interview was after you were in the midst of that binging and fasting process.
Yeah. I actually thought about going back and fasting again. And he said that I didn't necessarily need to do that, but I thought about it. I almost put down multiple thousands of dollars to actually go and refast again. And I'm really glad I didn't. In retrospect, what I needed to do was I needed to have very simple foods for quite a period of time. When you look at his retreat center, like, you have like mono meals. You need to have like single fruit or single food type meals for a period of time. And they're also really high water content. Like, you needed stuff with a lot of high water content for it to be able to digest easily. And I just didn't know. It was disastrous. I went from peak states to wanting to kill myself within days and weeks of this experience. And I also started volunteering at Casa de Luz at the time and being part of their morning crew and helping them with their macrobiotic organic diets, making the food for everyone that day because it gave me food at the time too. So I was determined to continue to heal my body, and ultimately I just didn't have the skill set to integrate and actually assimilate the experience that I had at the time. And it was just disastrous. It was, when I look back at that now, I was like, oh, that probably is what bipolar kind of looks like, right? Like those extreme highs and extreme lows, except they were like it was self-induced on accident.
And so did you notice that had any play with your binge and fasting afterwards? Or was it more that the relationship with food was really being needed to be addressed?
It was the relationship with food that was really needing to be addressed. And that was why I fasted in the first place. Because I was like, well, if I, cut food out of the picture, I can heal my body, which ended up being true. And that was one of the things I did notice after the fast is my digestion is working like clockwork. And it had never worked so well. One of the things that even got me to notice the digestive stuff was that my latency time, which it takes for how much time it takes from when you eat something to when you release it, was 2 or 3 days behind before the fast, which is called latent constipation. And I knew that because of a specific protocol that I went on and worked with a practitioner, and I've identified that. And that went away right after the fast, which was really cool. But that was short-lived because my sporadic nature with food and how I was eating and how much I was eating, I literally couldn't stop myself from eating.
So you were going through these food swings.
Majorly.
Mm-hmm. And then what?
Well, the food swings, the inability to get myself to stop eating and then getting myself to be so full brought a lot of mental chatter that was not supportive, which often had to do some level of self-hatred and self-judgment around how I was eating. So I was shaming myself in regards to how I was relating to food, which if you know anything about addiction cycles, that's actually what makes the addiction cycle keep going, is that shame specifically. And that's what addiction cycles, they keep occurring because we do something that we're not supposed to be doing, or our relationship to what we're doing actually makes us keep doing the thing, basically, because it affects our self-esteem, our relationship with ourselves negatively. So it just kept spinning out, and it was like this for like weeks on end. And eventually I ended up looking at my finances and I'm like, I cannot keep living like this. I cannot keep spending this much money on food. And I had an experience with mushrooms. I'd just been introduced to psilocybin at the time, and I realized that my mind was controlling me. I'd been meditating for years at the time, but I wasn't at the point where I wasn't my mind yet. I was still very much in my mind, and I was at the mercy of what my mind was doing. And so it gave me a chance to step back and being like, oh, like I am being controlled by my mind. And I started trying to seek more mushrooms to solve the problem, but I couldn't get more mushrooms. Actually, I remember sitting at my friend's house who I was staying with at the time and being like, oh shit, like I'm not being given what I need right now to be able to address what's happening.
So you recognized that you didn't have the tools that you needed, and that your only tool was mushrooms at the time, and so you were seeking that.
Well, the only tool I had at the time was fasting. That was the thing. So I kept binging and then fasting. That didn't work. I was starting to experience suicidal ideation at the first time, and I didn't have the skill set to let it go at the time and just let it pass. There's a whole episode on that. Suicidal ideation specifically. It's like when you are your mind, you're caught in the loop of the suicidal ideation, and you don't have as much choice with that actual decision. Your mind is the one that's telling you what to do, and you don't know that you're not your mind, so that you think that you are the one that is thinking about doing suicidal ideation. Once you get to higher levels of practice, you're realizing you are not your mind, and you can just let those thought patterns go and not participate in them. I didn't have that skill set yet. And I remember sitting on the porch and being like, oh shit, like this isn't working. And Austin in the summer sucks. Like, so you're either out really early in the morning or you're up really late at night to be able to be outside. It's fucking hot. Summer for the most other places in the world is like, 80s, 90s max. So I'm like, that's why we're like, we can go in May and June. And then after that, you don't want to go in there because it gets in the hundreds, 110 plus sometimes. And just high, like 107, 115 degrees outside. And the only time to be outside is at night, like 11 p.m. at night or like 5 a.m. in the morning. And I was also starting to use nature at that time to be able to ground myself and be okay. When it got so hot that I wasn't even riding my bike anymore, I wasn't even writing in my journal anymore, I realized that I was needing some extra support.
So you recognized that you needed extra support.
It took some time.
What actually brought you to that decision? Was there any moment?
Jordan, one of my closest friends, Jordan's from childhood. I think I talked to Jordan about it actually, and that's one of the wonderful thing about having amazing friends that know you and care about you. It's like when you're not okay, they'll be like, sit you down and have a conversation with you. Some call that intervention. It probably was. I don't remember it super specifically, but I'm pretty sure it was a conversation with Jordan and probably with Elise around what was going on, and they were like, you need help. You need to ask for help. And I was like, well, I feel terrified of asking for help. Which after working with lots of people, that is indeed a consistent pattern. One of the greatest acts of courage I think someone can do is ask for help. And you do whatever you need to do to ask for help. They actually got on the phone with me. Elise was somewhere, like she's in Chicago, and Jordan's was out in San Francisco, and they both got on the phone with me when I talked to my mom and my dad, and I told them what was going on. I asked for help. All I knew is what I was doing wasn't working, and it wasn't sustainable. I knew that I needed help, and then I needed to be outside with trees and blue water, and being on the phone with them, they were like, what are you imagining? And I was like, I need someone else to control my meals. That's the level of help that I needed. Because initially, right when I asked for help, I was working with a coach, and my dad was thinking that I was using her as a therapist, and they weren't wrong, but she was not a specialized therapist. She was a nutritionist with a background in helping people with their food issues to achieve their health goals. I tried going to a therapist for a period of time. The problem with going to a therapist when I was in Austin is I would go to the therapist and then I would binge. It's part of the reason I love the EFT work that we do. It's like we actually get to help people process in the moment, and so they can leave the session and not have to go process afterwards. It's like, no, we've got it like handled, and we can get you into a good state before you leave so you don't go sabotage yourself. And so one of the things I realized is I need someone to take care of my food circumstances because I'm not able to clearly.
And so how did that conversation go with your parents?
They were shocked, I would say. They were surprised.
Did they have any idea that anything was going on?
No, my mom knew because she knows. She has spidey senses, as I think mothers do. She knew something was off, but she didn't know what it was. And even since then, whenever I've been not okay, she's known There's been a sense within her that she's known. And I think that's part of like motherly intuition. And I want to honor that. She was accurate. And I also would only call them when I was high, like doing really well. I wouldn't call them when I was in my lows.
So they were shocked.
But also unconditionally supportive. They've been amazing. And one of the gifts about Elise specifically is like in high school, her brother also went through treatment at the time. He was coming to terms with him being gay. And I don't know exactly what it is that got him there, but from the external perspective, as someone who's grown up with him, that was what I saw shifted. Even though I knew my whole life that he was, but like it took some time for him to come out and come into himself. So they had what's called an educational consultant, and they forwarded that to my dad. And my dad's very solution oriented.
So let's go back. What's an education's consultant?
Basically, there's specific consultants that help you find the right place to go. It's a specific work, like
in terms of therapy.
In terms of
Inpatient.
therapy. If I had needed outpatient, he probably would have told me to go that direction. But he's the right who, right? We're always talking about the who, not the how. Who's the right person to talk to know where to send me? He was the right person to know. And I got on the phone with him and he's like, what do you want? And I was like, I need a holistic, mindfulness-based, organic foods. And they came back with like 2 options. One was like a permaculture experience in Hawaii, actually. And then the other one was a backpacking, holistic, mindfulness-based, organic food experience based out of Durango, Colorado. And at the time, I'd been spending a lot of time outside and loved wandering. And the backpacking part really, really spoke to me. It wasn't hands in the dirt yet, even though there's still a part of me that's wanting to develop that part.
So what I'm hearing is your parents were actually very supportive.
Yeah, they were 100% on board. It terrified them. And I think they're still recoiling 8 years later about that experience. And they immediately jumped on it. And my dad's background is he was an executive in corporate America, and he's very solutions oriented, so making sure that we're solving the correct problem. But he basically knew, and since I've talked to him about it, he's like, I don't know what to do about this, but I'm going to find the right person who does. So he knew the who, not how philosophy already, and that was a huge game changer. I was on a plane within probably 2 weeks after
Amazing.
Signing away my rights to put myself into an organization that could help me. I do remember the moment I told them about the fast, though. We were in an oyster bar in in a really nice part of Austin when they came and visited, probably because I asked for help.
And you told them after the fast, not during.
I told them after the fast, not during. I shut them out during a period of the fast, actually.
They had no idea that you were going
through
that.
They had no idea I was going through that. They knew that I was like starting to involve myself in alternative healing modalities, and we have since learned to have different belief systems, but at the time I wasn't able to be heard in what I was experiencing. And so I ended up just surrounding myself with people who did understand and were supportive.
So you're in this oyster bar.
And I told them.
And how did it go?
I don't remember that much, honestly. But I imagine they were shocked and baffled and concerned and terrified all at the same time, because their biggest thing even to this day is like, I could have died, is basically what they said. You could have died. Yes, they're accurate. I could have died. And I did not.
So what I'm hearing is that wasn't necessarily supportive for your relationship with them.
No, it was highly damaging. And in retrospect, there was deeper relational dynamics that were going on with my mom and my dad that didn't promote an environment for me to come and be able to talk to them about things without judgment and without trying to change what I was saying. They're a lot better about it after we've been in family therapy for a little while now, where they know that we can have different belief systems and we can still hear each other. That's new.
And I do want to give a shout out to Kova here, that she has been diligently showing up every single week for about a year.
Yeah, it's been 8 years. I've been needing to show up I've had no option not to show up, basically. But thank you for the shout out. And I want to shout out them too, because I hear a lot of stories about parents with kids who have been needing help, and sometimes it breaks apart relationships, and my parents have stayed together, and it's actually, I think, made them stronger in a lot of ways. And they've been 100% in.
Which is such a beautiful gift.
Yeah. Which to me speaks to the importance of making sure that when you have children, that both parties are 100% committed. And thankfully they were. They wanted me. And they were both 100% into wanting me. So when this came up, they're like, okay, we're going to do whatever's required right now.
So they did what was required. You were on a plane 2 weeks later after having this conversation.
Maybe within even a week. It was very quick.
And where did you go?
So as I mentioned, I was offered 2 different options for intensive inpatient. There's only one higher level of mental health care than that. You go to the hospital and they bring you into the psych unit. And then the psych unit, they bring you from there. I went straight to intensive inpatient, and I went to a place called Open Sky Wilderness Therapy based out of Durango, Colorado, which has since closed, which I'm very deeply saddened about because it changed my life. I know someone that was one of the directors of the program, and one of the things he said was that wilderness therapy has gotten a really bad rap. And I'm here to change that conversation because it helped change my life.
Beautiful. Let's talk a little bit high level first. Like, what was the program all about? What were its principles?
Totally. Yeah. First of all, this is really special, and I want people to share about this. I had the blessing to spend 3 months in the backcountry of Durango, Colorado, living primitively with quality gear and good organic food, plenty of guidance and mentorship by one, like actual qualified therapists, and two, guides that were actually in the woods with you, and getting to see some of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Even to this day, when I'm needing to regulate myself and calm down, I will imagine being somewhere in the woods that we were. And I will feel the earth, and I will imagine it, and I will feel my experience of being out there. Like, it's still in my body being out there.
Will you paint a picture of it for us? For those of us who have not been to the backcountry of Durango.
I fell in love with the mountains. I grew up in Ohio.
So I'd like you to imagine that your feet are on the earth, that there's trees around you.
No one around. Except a group of there's usually no more than 8 students at a time with 4 guides out there. So a group of 12 of us. And they would drive us to different places all around Durango. A lot of it was in the San Juan Mountains. But we never knew where we were going because they didn't want us to know, because they didn't want us to run. And one of the things I had to do when I signed up was sign a form that said if I was going to run and they needed to use search and rescue, I would be responsible for the payment of it. Kids do run. I've worked in this care, and they do run because they don't want to be there. They don't want to look at themselves. I'll tell you the experience of first getting out there. Flew out of Austin, flew into this tiny little airport in Durango, Colorado, so small that you walk directly into the tarmac. And I got picked up by one of the workers for Open Sky. She takes me to get a physical, and then she takes me to have some lunch, and then they actually take me to Open Sky itself, the base camp, where they outfitted me with all this gear. It wasn't like Walmart clothes. It was like Big Agnes and really good gear. Everything from warm layers to boots to socks to pants that turned into shorts, really ugly looking t-shirt, really terrible light green that I had to wear the whole time. And it wasn't that much clothes. That's the other thing. It's like we live with way more than we possibly need. But they gave us what we needed. So warmer coats, quarter zips, puffy jacket. I went beginning of June, thank God, because based in Austin, even when I first got there, it was cold for me and it took some time to be able to acclimate. But they took us out to an area. I don't know where it was because we weren't allowed to know where it was, but it's called the Nipple. Lily and I called it the Nipple because Lily was someone that I met in that specific environment. She was also receiving treatment. We've been back to this place multiple times, and there was a little mountain that looked like a nipple, basically. So that's my only context for where we were. I had the person who dressed me, and they gave me all the stuff too. They even gave me my own little metal canteen that you see and they had my initials ingrained on it. But I didn't even get my own backpack. They gave me this like backpack and that was like air quotes for people who aren't watching this. That was literally like a tarp with, specifically folded in a way with P-cord, which is the specific type of rope that they give you out there, and seatbelt straps, because you have to earn your ability to get a real backpack out there. And that was uncomfortable. What I didn't realize at the time was that the fast had depleted me, and I was not fit at all. I'd eaten through a lot of my muscles. When we got to Team Durga, which was basically the name that I was given, which Durga, by the way, is a Hindu goddess for slaying ignorance. I had to climb a mountain to get to where they were, which, by the way, where they were sleeping, we'd go back multiple points. It was covered in cow patties like you'd never see before. By cow patties, I mean cow poop everywhere on this area. And there weren't really people around. Like, the only time I saw anyone outside of the actual guides was once at the end of my trip, at the end of the 3 months I was out there, and the guy was looking for a mushroom festival. He's like, do you know where the mushroom festival are? And we're all like laughing hysterically. So one, we hadn't seen anyone outside of the treatment program in months. And two, he's looking for a mushroom festival. Anyways, I ended up climbing up this mountain, and it was exhausting because, first of all, the altitude of Colorado I wasn't used to. I just had to keep trucking up this mountain with this makeshift backpack that was not comfortable, and all this like outdoor outfit that I'd just been given with a terrible light green, like worst possible color for my skin tone. To get a little more context here,
Kova's mom is a personal shopper and an interior designer.
Yeah.
So aesthetic is very important.
And because they give me the worst color, and I'm like, of all colors, and all the pictures I have associated with this time are with this terrible color. And I'd like much shorter hair than I had now. I actually wanted to shave my head beforehand, but One of the reasons that I got put into treatment so quickly was because my sister was getting married and they wanted to be able to make me get to the wedding, which didn't end up happening. And I didn't shave my head because my dad wanted me to be good for the pictures, but I really wanted to shave my head. Usually when I see someone shave their head, that means they've gone through some type of transformation. And shamanism has to do with memories and associations in the hair. I really wanted to let it go and step into something new. I climb up this mountain and I get to this group of people. I'm not even allowed to engage with them because I was part of the mouse, part of the journey. So the medicine wheel is what the entire program was based off of. And there's different aspects to the journey that you go through different stages and you have to earn your way through this program. The mouse is where you start. You're not allowed to engage with the group yet. The guides can engage with you, but you can't engage with the group yet. You're basically in the observer mode where they start teaching you how to be there eventually until they invite you into the group where you go into the south, and the south is the coyote, which is the fun, it's the play, it's the learning how to live outside, basically. It's fire. That's what the associations are that we got taught with it. I remember once I finally get up to the group, there's all these people that are out in the middle of nowhere. Like there's not anyone around. Like we've gone backpacking and there's people everywhere. That's not what I'm used to. I'm used to no one else being around. It was cold out there. When I first got up there, I was very much still in the, like, I just fasted a whole long period of time. I was mostly talking to the guides at first. So I was with the group, but they weren't allowed to engage with me yet. And I wasn't allowed to engage with them yet. Eventually I did get a mentor who was already in the thing, Celeste, who had dirt all over her face. But once you go out of the observer's phase, which is before you just get there, you actually get, it's all based off of ceremony. It's one of the most beautiful experiences I've had. The first time I've experienced ceremony, besides like Jewish ceremony, there was a ceremony that actually invited me into the South and invited me into really the voyage, the journey of traversing the medicine wheel and eventually graduating and becoming someone very different on the other side of it.
So let's go back to being a mouse at the very beginning. So you're observing. What were some of the first things that you noticed when you were observing all these people that you had never met before? They were living in the backcountry. They had dirt all over their faces. What did you notice about them?
It wasn't so much about the people, actually. It was more of where we were. It was mountainous, beautiful, green pine trees, water. It was the complete opposite of Ohio, but it was absolutely beautiful. And that wasn't even the most beautiful place that I've been. Like there's so many stories from that experience, which again, if you have any other additional questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. I mean, what I remember is my mentor, Celeste. She's much younger than me and her face was covered in dirt. I'm like, what are you doing covered in dirt, right? Even with living outside, because I grew up washing my face every morning and every evening. I actually don't do it in the nighttime anymore unless I wear makeup now, which that's like me letting go a little bit. But I actually maintained my cleanliness out there. That was part of the feedback I got as a guide. I was always clean. She was not. And that was shocking to me. I was like, what are you doing with your she's like literally covered in dirt. And Lily was also covered in dirt all over her face when I met her. And I feel comfortable just using these people's first names. I'm going to do that for their privacy.
Okay. So you met Celeste for the first time. And what was Celeste like? What was your experience of meeting her?
What is this person as my mentor? This younger person as my mentor covered in dirt. Why are they my mentor of all these people?
So you did not respect her.
No, I did not respect her. And I was a lot older too. So usually, I mean, the group, I was in the young adults group and I think that went from 18 to 29 and I was 25. And there was only one other person that was my age. There's two. There's one person that was there because of stuff in the courts. He got sent there because of stuff that happened outside. And then the other person was there for mental health and she was within a year of me in age. So,
and about what percentage of the group had chosen to be there?
Very few people. Most of them had to go there or were sent there. The only person that actually wanted to go there, I think, was Lily. Lily for sure signed up. So there was a 2-to-1 ratio. You got your own guide, basically, as a mentor, and the guide would shift every week. There'd be a week in, a week out. And then you would repeat, basically. And usually you'd stick with the same mentor within the same guiding shift. And there was also a therapist every week. One of the things I loved about their program is we'd go to all these different places. I've worked in wilderness therapy and we just traversed the same land. I hated that specific path. We would go back to base camp, refill and restock. We'd wash our clothes in a bucket, have therapy, meditate all together with all the groups together. And now in this conversation, I'm realizing Celeste was actually the transition into the group. So I got to meet her first, and then I got transitioned into the group through ceremony. When I first met Celeste, we were on the outskirts, and she would engage with me and ask questions, and I'd ask her questions and all that type of stuff. She was there for addiction, actually. For addiction recovery is the right way to put that specifically. And I was never particularly close to her.
How was your transition into the group?
The only thing I really remember is being where we were. It wasn't quite the nipple. The nipple was a couple day more hike past where it was then when I met them. About a 1 more day hike. Someone who's actually Boulder based. I haven't seen him here. He grew up here. Blanking on his name. But
he was a student.
And he was there for video game addiction or something, mental health related. His mom is a neuroscientist or something, and she sent him there. He didn't end up going to transitional care afterwards, but he was having his, what was that called? He was having some type of ceremony about him going through his West work. And so, again, the thing is based off the medicine wheel. So it goes from the south, the west, which is the road of trials. It's associated with water and the underworld, your inner work, basically. And then it goes into the north, which is leadership. It's the bison.
So was Celeste in the north when you...
No, not everyone makes it to the north. Some people don't even make it to the west. Because there's a bunch of requirements. You have to bow drill, which is starting your own fire with a wooden bow, and then you learn how to use a spindle and make a set that actually creates a coal, which is part of our daily bow drilling time. We did it every single day. If you could actually create a coal, then you have to make it go into a fire. Most people can't even get it into a coal, and then if you can get the coal, you have to basically birth the coal into an actual fire, and then sometimes you lose the coal on the way to making the fire. That depended on whether or not we had warm or hot dinner that night.
So this bow drilling process was an initiation that if you had successfully created fire with your own hands, then you had the privilege of diving into the underworld.
So there were other aspects of it. There was specific communication frameworks that I learned out there, the feeling statement framework, which I've taught you, which is I feel this because, and I imagine I feel this way because of this, and then my hope for the future, this, right?
And how does that framework support you in your conversations?
Well, part of what we were doing out there was learning how to actually communicate what we were feeling. And we would actually call a team D. So someone would be like, I have something I need to express, right? And I'd be like, Team D or Team Durga or something. And then everyone would stop, including the guides, and everyone would circle around. And this person would use that framework to express what they were feeling. And then once they were complete, someone would raise their hand and be like, and then they would reflectively listen what the person expressed, and
go ahead and translate what that means.
So Team D, and then everyone would stop, including guides, all students, everyone, no matter where we could be literally in the middle of the trail, we would stop, right? And then I'll practice a feeling statement. I feel...
What was something that Jackie might have been feeling at the time?
That's a story in itself. Pretty briefly after getting there, there was one guide in particular who's amazing. He actually went through the program and then left and then became a guide. He's one of the best guides I had because he actually got it. He challenged me to make a feeling statement to the group. He's like, you're all into this holistic healing thing. This is part of it. I remember doing my first feeling statement to the group, which was terrifying to me at the time because I was not used to expressing my feelings and what was actually going on. It's practicing transparency is really what it is. And then they also gave us this workbook that had a list of feelings in it. So I took it out of my pocket and I'm like, what is it that I'm feeling? Which, by the way, I still do this with people, and I have a feelings wheel on the back of my computer because it's important to know what is it actually I'm experiencing. And I didn't even have a vocabulary to describe what it was. I think that night I had a dream about one of the mentors that I had that previous night, and there was shame or something that came up. And he challenged me to communicate it to the group. So I called my first team and expressed my feelings to the group. And then someone reflected me, which they basically were like, I heard you said this. Is that correct? And I'll be like, no, you missed this part. And I'll tell them what they missed. And then they'll be like, okay, so I heard you say this. And I'm like, yeah, you got it. Do you feel heard completely? And I'll be like, yes. Or and if I don't, I'd say no. And they're like, what am I miss? And then I tell them. And then we keep going in that back and forth until I feel heard. And then they don't say anything other than I feel X, Y, and Z. They'd only respond with feelings. I feel understanding. I feel compassionate. I feel empathy. And I think that's really important.
And not necessarily all loving, happy feelings either. It can be whatever is actually authentic in that moment.
Oftentimes when people do reflective listening, they'll start going back and forth. You need to make sure that the person feels understood first. What's the beautiful thing about reflecting with a feeling is it doesn't bring story into it. It just gets it to dissipate. Once that's complete, then you start going on your way. And that was terrifying to me at the time because I'd never expressed that level of vulnerability yet. That was the first time that I actually did it. I would have had to get signed off on my booklet as I expressed a feeling statement to the group. And I would have had to express a certain amount of them. There was also feedback statements, OPS, observation, perception, suggestion. which is how you give feedback. It doesn't have the feeling part of it. It's mostly just what is it that I observe, my perspective on it, and then what's my suggestion off of it. You do the reflective listening thing. And then you have to complete a certain amount of them in addition to tying knots in a certain way. I learned to tie all these different types of knots. There were all these tasks that I needed to do to even qualify to make it to potentially go to the West. And then there was all these different tasks in the West that you had to complete to even get qualified to get into the North. And there's all these tasks you had to complete in the North. And you had to go into council to even get into the North, into leadership. So there was a leadership council that I had to go into to even get voted into leadership. And then I got voted into leadership before I even got into leadership. I was already in leadership. I learned to lead by example there for the first time.
As you're transitioning into each of the different stages.
Yeah.
Isn't everyone there supposed to be there for healing?
Yeah.
The West is a necessary aspect that people need to go into in order to heal, correct?
You'd think so. Yes. First of all, it was all set off of ceremony. I had a ceremony to go from being the observer to the South, like the coyote, the child part of being out there and learning to live outside. And then there's a ceremony from me going from the South to the West. And then there's a ceremony for me going to the West to the North. I learned to call in the directions and use Palo Santo and all of that type of stuff. That was completely foreign to me at the time, but it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. Part of being out in the woods was developing self-efficacy and learning how to do hard shit and developing self-respect out of doing hard shit. There was someone in the woods who had terrible dexterity and she couldn't do any of the knots, right? And eventually she started getting better at the knots, but it caused a lot of emotional turmoil to even get the knots correct. Self-efficacy is like, can I develop myself? Can I do hard shit? Can I persevere long enough to eventually develop fire, right? Like, I didn't get given a set. Oftentimes people get gifted them from their mentor to the mentee, but I didn't. And for me, it was perfectly fitting because I've been given a lot in my life. And I actually had to drill my own rock. I had to use that shovel we had in the woods and I had to carve into a rock, like create it so that a spindle could go into the rock and they could actually drill my own. I had to make my entire set and show up for months on end and keep bow drilling and not make it, and then keep bow drilling and not make it. Eventually I switched sets and realized, oh, it wasn't cottonwood that was good for me. It was sage that was the right one. And as soon as I switched to sage, I started making fire.
So what I'm hearing is it's kind of like your Harry Potter wand. You're using the wrong wood.
I was using the wrong wood. And so, but it was very character developing to me because again, I've been given a lot in my lifetime. My parents thought that was a good thing. They're like, we gave you everything you needed. And that was kind of detrimental in some ways. There's character building that occurs in actually earning something. Even if someone didn't necessarily make it to the West, there was a lot of character building in doing hard shit. Living outside during the monsoon season, not fun. Learning how to set up an A-frame tent using a tarp and string
with drenching, pouring rain.
Yeah, they gave us good enough gear that I actually maintained my dryness, but there's a grit that I developed in that world. Like I'm willing to put up with quite a bit of suffering. And that's part of what wilderness is purposely teaching you. And by wilderness, I mean wilderness therapy. That's what us wilderness people call it, is the ability to sit in discomfort. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very missed out in this society. Very few people have learned the ability to sit in discomfort. And that's why the way that I develop people is having them sit in discomfort. That's how I develop their character. And I do that in a different way. I can do that outside, but we can do that emotionally. And you've been on the receiving end of my character development.
And it actually brings healing and you get to experience the opposite emotion after sitting in that painful emotion. Yeah. So there is a part to it as well, not being wet and cold.
And then there's a couple other aspects of wilderness therapy because this is important because they actually taught us this stuff. One, it was a microcosm. So this tiny little group of people out in the woods, whatever happened in there was totally a microcosm for life. However I was relating to the people in there, like it was totally a microcosm for life. And we would get feedback. A microcosm is a small experience of something external, like in the macro. So something that I was experiencing in the microcosm of wilderness therapy was likely something that I was experiencing in my life.
So for example, if you had a certain kind of dynamic with a person in this small environment, you are probably also having that in a greater scheme of your life.
One of the things that we did in between guide shifts, so when guide shifts would flip from like 1 week to the next, they would have us sit in a feedback circle with the therapist, all the guides, but from both shifts with the therapist, with all the students, and then the guides in front of everyone would say, okay, what was Jackie? Kova is my abbreviated version of my Hebrew name, Yaakova, which is Jackie in Hebrew. They would say, Jackie, you know, her rose for the week was this, and her thorn for the week was this. And this would be in front of everybody. And I used to freaking shiver in my body because I would be so nervous about receiving feedback in front of everybody. But that would give everybody the knowing of what everyone was working on. My mentor, I gave her feedback. I was like, your face is dirty. To me, that means that you don't care about yourself. My suggestion is if you care about yourself to wipe down your face at night And she did. She started wiping down her face at night.
If you're looking at Kova's face, she was really pleased with herself, really happy about this.
Yeah, it worked. One of the things
Using the framework that she was given.
And this taught me a lot of skills, right? Being out in the world many years later, it's like most people cannot receive feedback. Most people cannot give feedback. I have people who will receive feedback from very few people because they know that most people cannot deliver it in a way that they can receive it. But I've learned to deliver it in a way that people can receive it. So they'll receive my feedback, right? Mm-hmm. And most people are not used to receiving feedback, likely going to create some type of feedback circle for leadership. Just like learning how to give and receive feedback. We need it and it's important. The guides also needed to receive feedback sometimes. One of the things I noticed with one of the shifts is that one of the shifts was a lot less pleasant to be around than the other ones, and I couldn't place what it was. And then I realized the entire group of us felt the same way. And so I actually ended up started to stand up to the specific guide. And one of the times, usually when you express a feeling statement, they give you the whole time to express the feeling statement. And he actually cut me off and wouldn't let me express my feeling statement. I remember going to bed that night under my A-frame somewhere, which by A-frame, I literally mean just like a piece of string. It wasn't even a tent. There was no sides to it. It was just a tarp set between two trees with rope held down by rocks. They wouldn't give us anything sharp. So like...
Ever have a squirrel crawl over your face?
A spider, though. Spiders, and yeah. It was open to the elements.
So anyway.
He wouldn't give me his feedback. I went to bed furious that night. I remember just rolling around in bed, absolutely furious. And the next day, all the guides were trying to get me to work together with this guide, and I wouldn't do it. My stubbornness, my Taurus was like, absolutely not. This guy is not in leadership that is being supportive right now. And eventually I was like, he needs to receive feedback. He's not letting this happen. He's trying to control these different things. The guides kept trying to coerce me to work together with the guy, and I wouldn't do it. And my stance was that he needed to be able to receive feedback from the whole team. And that's eventually ended up what happening. He ended up receiving feedback from the entire team. So it was a feedback circle where all the feedback was directed at this one guide, and he changed after that. I was actually able to have him be my mentor after that. He stepped out of being an asshole. This has been part of my life's work, noticing when leadership is not actually in authority, but they're in control or dominance. And there's really negative patterns in leadership. He was in it. Having a framework like that and the ability to give someone feedback and for him to receive it was life-changing for not just the team. It changed the team dynamic. It was supportive of the team, but it also was supportive of him. And it changed the entire dynamic of the guidance, shift, everything.
And what I'm hearing is you actually respected him after that point.
More
to the
so.
point where he became your mentor.
Yeah. I still think he's an asshole. That's the funny thing. Like when I talk about it, I'm fucking Ben. That's his name. That was instrumental to me. And that was right before my West work, actually. So on that actual outing, we climb up the mountain or wherever we're going.
So you were in the South.
I was in the South to transition into the West. And they have a ceremony for me. And we're up at some mountain, probably 100 miles out, but we're up high. There was a storm happening with thunder and lightning, but it wasn't on top of us, but it was out there. You could see it kind of like we just saw at Rainbow, but it was way farther out because we were up at altitude. We could see this beautiful, amazing storm happening right as I was going into the Westward. He thought it was symbolic of me and my thunder needing to use my authority correctly. I did, and I'm so glad and proud of myself. And that was the first time I got to really see what my work is. Since then, being out of that setting, I've gotten to stand up to leadership and stand in my integrity and what I know to be true and right. And what I've noticed about it is it either makes people stronger or it makes everything crumble. So I've had multiple experiences since then in leadership positions, or not even technically in leadership positions that I've been given, even though technically I was in the leadership position by the eyes of the people around me, was that, you know, when giving feedback, people would either resort back and go into their negative patterning and go out of integrity, and then the whole thing crumbles. It could be a business. Most of them have been businesses when I stand up for what's right and true. And then some businesses get stronger out of it. And he was a specific individual. Like he was, thankfully the systems and the structures were in place that he actually got stronger out of it. It made the team stronger, and he stepped up. That's why I think feedback is so important, and feedback and learning how to give it and how to receive it is so imperative. And I don't think it's common enough these days.
So you transitioned to the West.
I transitioned to the West.
And so moving from this playful, childlike wonder into the waters, into the depths, into the underworld. Yeah. What was that experience like for you?
Honestly, I think I was pretty distracted at the time. I met Lily in the woods. We'd sing and dance, and I needed to even get to the West, I needed to do a mutual bow drill. So create fire with someone else at the same time, and she helped me do that. The hardest part about being out there was my relationship with food. it took me a long time to bring people into what was going on. It took me until I think potentially right before she left or right after she left to be like, I feel like emotional eating right now. Team D, call it Team D. Like, I feel this and I'm wanting to do this and I'm imagining I'm feeling this way because of this. And my hope for myself is this. It took me a lot of courage to be able to learn how to do that with people because there was a lot of shame that was associated with eating in a way that was really detrimental to myself. They did, for the most part, control when we ate, but we still had our own snack bag. At the same time, I couldn't control the snack bag at night because we would put it up into a bear hang. In some ways, it was organized and helpful, but my eating stuff was still going on when I was there, and it was really hard on me.
So were you just binging on Gorp?
Yep. And I was also refusing to eat meat at the time when I was really needing to in retrospect, because after fasting, I was needing all the B vitamins and everything that was in meat, and my muscles weren't as strong as they needed to be being out there. But I loved being out there. I loved the beauty and the adventures, sleeping underneath the stars and the water runs, even though the water runs sucked sometimes because you had to get water for everybody. You know, there was different tasks within the group to get everything done. And this is like the first time I like really had the opportunity to step into leadership. I'd been passed over probably because of my self-esteem, and the environment I grew up in wasn't exactly promoting my authority. They were the authority, giving my authority over to my parents, but I received feedback early on from the therapist of like, you actually need to earn the leadership. And the way you can do that is by leading by example. By the time I was in leadership, I was known for being very operationally strong. I could get shit done very effectively. Like right after dinner, I just call her Team D and I was like, okay, who wants to do what? So I'd automatically allocate all the tasks to the people and then everyone would get everything done really quickly. And that was rare to have that level of operational efficiency. But for me, my heart hadn't fully integrated the love from the fast yet. So what I needed to develop was empathy at the time. And I wasn't very empathetic. My voice can be very direct and I can be very abrasive sometimes still. It's a lot better.
Not very much sugarcoating.
I don't sugarcoat. And so what I was needing to learn was empathy in my specific leadership. And there was times in my leadership that like I knew I would fuck up on things. I opened myself up for feedback automatically. By doing that, it totally decimated any issues. One woman in particular who I had issues with, although there was team dynamics with everybody, right? There was conflict that would happen with people on the team, and I wasn't very empathetic with that one specific person, and I knew it as soon as I did it. And then I just opened myself up for feedback. And one of the things I noticed is that when I did that, even as in a leadership position, it just dissolved the tension and it creates a level of equilibrium. That's why I think the top-down leadership approach is a bit outdated. Everyone's got a position on the team and it doesn't make one better than the other.
Wonderful. I'd like you to elaborate on that a little bit so that everyone can really understand the learning that you received.
Well, you know, working in corporate environments and team environments now, it's like oftentimes there's this hierarchical leadership style and it's been passed down for thousands of years, right? The king, the queen, and so on and so forth. There's always someone above you that has the power. Even if it was earned or not, usually it's a very top-down approach. I say this, therefore you do this. And there's not like a decided communication going on. I think that's outdated. And there's also this perspective that they're higher up on the hierarchical leadership ladder, therefore they're better and have more power. But in reality, you actually need to surrender some of that power over to the people that are around you to actually be able to lead. Because I think that leadership is just a place on the team. It doesn't make me better or worse. It doesn't make me have more power or less power than you. It's just my specific place on the team, and you have an equal place to me on the team. And you deserve to be heard, you deserve to be respected, and you have a specific role that I need to understand, and you're going to understand things that I don't understand. So opening up that level of communication, I had no ability to receive feedback before this. None. Absolutely none. I had no ability to express myself and what was actually going on. I didn't have an ability to resolve conflict whatsoever before any of this. And I also didn't have the ability to sit in discomfort. I've been given a lot in my life. And one of the things that occurred in this environment, once you went into the West work, you receive a letter from your parents called an impact letter, basically. It's like, what is the impact that you've had on them? And it's a huge part of the West work specifically. And then you read it into the entire team, actually. And that was hard. So
that's quite an intense letter to read. And how was it receiving that?
Part of it was kind of blown out of the water a little bit. I had a psychological tester come test me, and I was transparent with her. And then they gave all those results to my mom and dad, which basically showed them all of the sexual trauma. And it wasn't very much sexual trauma, thankfully, but like all the drugs that I've taken, basically. They got the full look into all the drugs that I did. And they were really angry at me for doing all of that. And to me, I felt my trust was broken because I could disclose that information for myself. You know, it wasn't about them. And I felt like that wasn't fair that they just gave that information to my mom and my dad. And I was 25 at the time. So, you know, that was a break of trust because they didn't know the context of it. They didn't know why. And then there was all these questions about it. That was hard on me because I couldn't respond to it. Like at the time, all I knew to do was reflect, which was really annoying because we did a solo at one point, and that was like my work during the solo is to finally write them a response letter, and all I did was reflect them. I didn't stand up for myself at all, and I didn't have the chance because they weren't there, which was really annoying and frustrating because, yeah, I was being irresponsible, but them just pointing their finger and telling me I was wrong and bad wasn't the right way to handle it. So that was the first response to the impact letter. The other thing in response to the impact letter was my mom was really regretful around how much she helicoptered me as a kid and how much she just got involved with the parents and teachers to help me through school instead of just letting me fail earlier. And I still agree. I agree with her on that. Actually, it's much easier to fail and have a child fail in a smaller setting.
Like second grade.
Versus when I'm 25 and spend $500,000 to get myself out of it. Very different stakes. It's just a totally different ballgame. So that's kind of why I brought that up. There was a maturation process that needed to occur in that environment to hear them and what they had to say about my choices. It terrified them what I did. But ultimately, the problem wasn't actually solved until within the last 2 years or within the last year and a half about what it was that really created that. A lot of it, you know, after I asked for help, everything was pointed at me. I was the issue. Like, I had all the problems. But in reality, you know, and I do appreciate Open Sky for it was technically a family unit experience. My parents had all these exercises and things to do and things to reflect on with me going through it because I wasn't talking to them as much. It was harder for me to do that. We eventually had like a family quest where they came out there, and my mom will tell you to this day that she slept on the ground for me for 3 days, which is very unusual for her. In retrospect, it wasn't actually addressing the issue itself. Yeah. There's so much juice in wilderness therapy.
Mm-hmm. We could have a multi-part series.
It's interesting too.
So you were a little distracted during the West phase.
Mariah, the name of the therapist, eventually, you know now that for those who, I ended up falling in love with the woman that was in wilderness therapy and sleeping next to me. And I actually didn't tell the guides until she was leaving. They were not pleased with me. I understand why. It felt vulnerable. It didn't make sense to me. She's a lot younger than me and she's covered in dirt. I didn't understand. And, you know, once she left, it got hard. It was actually a fairly enjoyable experience when Lily was there with me.
And so let's take a step back. You were there for 3 months, correct?
3 months, yeah.
3 months. And she was there for how long of that?
She got there 3 weeks before I did. So she left there 3 weeks before I did.
So you had 2 months and 1 week. And then 3 weeks.
And we had a blast together. Most people, I think, really suffered through this experience. But we had a blast together. That made up for a lot of the hardness of this. Because it's not easy work. And it's not just, you know, you're being looked at, given feedback, having really hard conversations with people and receiving things that you might not want to hear about yourself. And it's uncomfortable. It's really, really uncomfortable. And then on top of that, you have to make fire. 95% of the time it doesn't work. You just have to keep going. You got to dig holes everywhere to be able to do it. And then you have to call your name when you're outside of the site of the guides when you're going to the bathroom. So I had to call Jackie every 3 to 5 seconds when I was going to the bathroom so they knew where I was. You could call it boot camp. It mostly was. And it was pretty easy when Lily was there with me because we had fun. Once Lily left, I went into a depression of sorts where I was like, this is no longer fun anymore. The only thing that was fun was creating fire because I finally got it about the time that she left. And it's exhilarating to be able to create fire. And I got to show my parents too, which was really cool. So it was hard, but it wasn't emotionally really hard until Lily left. And my therapist made a point of like, now your work really starts when she left is what she said to me. And she's accurate. She's been gone for a while now and the work has persisted since she's been gone. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Nature is wildly healing and completely calming to the nervous system. Getting to be outside in nature helped me stabilize myself and getting the care and the support that I needed and like it was basically 24/7 care. Even this guide slept right there when you were sleeping. Even when you went to the bathroom at night, you still had to call your name. And I needed that level of attention at the time to make sure that I didn't do anything harmful to myself.
So she left. And then what happened with your work?
It just sucked. The fun went away. It was just struggle and suffering in some ways. We kept doing the same stuff. The funny thing is, the water was mostly clean most of the time, and they gave us special purification technologies that we used. A lot of our time was spent gathering water together. cooking together and doing all these things where we had real conversations. And that was the other thing, is like real conversations with people about what was really going on. I don't think that was what I was used to at that time. It was an environment that created intimacy and bonding, because you're doing hard shit with people and you're having real conversations with them. They're hearing you and you're hearing them through all of it. When she left, she ran up, gave me a hug, picked me up and swung me around. It was sad for me to have her leave because I wasn't sure if I was going to see her again. The next 3 weeks, we went to some course area, wherever they take us, basically. We hadn't been together, hadn't been before, and there were like salamanders everywhere. It was one place we were sleeping at night, getting into a sleeping bag. The water was just so mucky. Some of the water was amazing, like straight out of a mountain stream that no one was around for hundreds of miles, traversing through fields of flowers with mountains surrounding you with just like tiers and tiers and levels of trees that, it's just absolute gorgeous. And that water sucked. It was just mucky and gross and dirty. However, it was clean for us to drink because of all the stuff we had to make it clean, thankfully. I think I was just struggling. And I was alone. I wasn't alone when she was there. And then I was. And it took us some time to bond. There were other people too. And you can talk to lots of other people, but not everyone's as interesting.
The connection with her was really special. And that's what got you through.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah.
And then when she left, it felt like your joy left.
Yeah, for sure. She definitely did embody that joy, for sure. And then I was just in leadership by myself.
Yeah.
Which was fine, but it wasn't fun anymore. And I don't think this experience was supposed to be fun, let's be honest. It is wilderness therapy after all. You're there to go look at yourself and take responsibility. And it was actually enjoyable for most of it. I have really positive memories of most of it. It was just those last 3 weeks where it was like a grind, basically, just to get through and do the things, and it wasn't fun anymore. Except one time we did sing this Harry Potter song. It's based off this YouTube thing. Yeah, we did a bunch of that.
And it's like Snape.
And then you do like an a cappella or something. Yeah,
and everyone's singing all at the same time.
Yeah. That's the kind of stuff we did out there. It was like lots of singing and lots of games. But there was also like P time, personal time, where you have your own personal time spot where you're not supposed to engage with anyone else. And you're also not allowed to talk to the other students without a guide present. It was all, that's the environment that taught me what emotional safety was. You're not allowed to talk about someone when they're not present. I still do that my best today. Part of the reason why people create emotionally unsafe environments is because they're talking about them when they're not present. The person needs to be present if you're going to talk about them to create an emotionally safe environment. And that environment was emotional safety. People think they know what emotional safety is, and they have no idea what emotional safety is. I've had a very expensive, immersive experience of what emotional safety actually feels like. It needed to be like that because of the work we were doing there. If the guides were allowed to talk about us when we weren't present, but we sure as heck weren't allowed to talk about each other when the guides weren't present. I did that once. Lily and I were able to do that once around the guides, and then I felt guilty about it, and I was transparent about it to the team, and I called it, and then it made me feel terrible. For a whole day of hiking, I was like self-berating myself for it,
All the guilt.
I didn't have the skill set to be able to let go of my emotions at the time. However, we did meditate every day, and we did yoga every single day, which was really, really great.
So who did you become during that experience?
I became proud of myself. When I was graduating the experience, I, for the first time, actually felt accomplished in completing something that I was going to do. And when I got there, I didn't know that I'd be outside for 3 months straight. Like, I thought there was going to be structures that we would like sleep inside of. And no, it was like, even at base camp, there was just like these massive tarps on like rope with no sides, sleeping on a foam thing and a sleeping bag. It was not luxurious by any means. And I had no idea what it was when I got there. And then it turned out there was a whole nother step afterwards that I didn't even know about. My sister got married when I was out in the woods, and my whole family was together celebrating her, and I was like in them with my dreams, but I wasn't there, and they didn't want me to leave because of different reasons. And so that was really hard for me to be out there without being there specifically, and got me to look at myself in that way too. It was uncomfortable. It was definitely uncomfortable.
And how else did you change as a person?
My communication skills completely changed, and I became a leader. First time in my life, I got finally recognized and earned leadership for the first time in my life, even though it's been in me, it just wasn't developed. And that was the first time that I really got to develop. And when we were sleeping, like one night we were like around the fire somewhere, they had a workshop on the different types of communication styles, and they showed us like a thing about like, what's the difference between assertive and passive aggressive. And I, for some reason, like really latched onto that. And I spent the entire summer learning how to be assertive. To this day, too, I'm very assertive, and I'm constantly watching how I communicate and what it is I say to be able to convey exactly what I need to. At one point when I started learning how to convey assertively, the way I was communicating, it wasn't really asking if people are willing. It was still a question to just get people to do what I wanted. And which is
so a way of controlling.
It was.
Yeah.
It was like, can you do this thing? Versus will you do this thing? Those are two different questions. Can you do something? Yes, I can do something. Doesn't mean I want to do something or I'm willing to do something. Will you do this thing? Yes, I'm willing to do this thing. That level of awareness for like communication. I walked out of there with the ability to communicate. And as a leader too, communication is like one of the biggest hallmarks of a leader. And I can do that at depth. I can have hard conversations with people. I can hear them. I can de-escalate people in challenging emotional states. I can receive feedback. I actually seek feedback right now. That's one of the pieces of feedback I do get from people. They love how much I'm seeking feedback because I'm not scared of it. Sometimes I still get a little bit nervous, but like there's nothing that can say anything to me that there's nothing that I'm not going to be saying something worse to myself, right? Like my inner talk used to be much worse than it is now, that like it doesn't matter what people would say, I would say something worse to myself. So it's like, but now that's not the case anymore. It's like I have such a strong sense of self-love for myself. I can receive feedback and take responsibility for whatever it is that I'm not seeing. And I actually really respect that. So when I'm looking for friends and I'm looking for people that I can receive mentorship with or give mentorship with, it's like, can they receive feedback? Will they receive feedback? And learning how to give feedback too. Is the door open, or am I going to walk into the door when trying to give feedback? A therapist gave me that metaphor. It's like, if the door isn't open for you to walk through, aka asking whether or not to get feedback, you're going to end up walking into the door. So you need to ask if the door is open to give feedback. So you just need to ask to give feedback. And I've walked away with the ability to communicate at depth with people. And then since Lily and I stayed in a relationship for a while, like I kept repping the feeling statements. I kept repping the feedback statements. I kept repping the reflective listening. And that's the feedback I get to this day. Is like I can often reflect people and say what they're saying to me in a better way than what they're saying it to me. And they tell me that all the time. You're like, yo, you just said that better than I could have said it myself. That's the level of reflective listening that I've learned to develop specifically. And the mindfulness practice. We meditated every single day. And having that level of accountability. And then I went to a program afterwards that was mindfulness based where you meditated every single day. And I'd been meditating before all of this, but it really helped me implement a practice that, to this day, it's like I meditate every single day.
Any other takeaways that you'd like to share?
I think the biggest thing that, is being discerning who you spend your time with. And I walked away from that experience with one true friend. And then I walked away from that experience with some other people that I went in that experience with that in retrospect I should not have stayed in contact with. And I knew that, and I didn't listen to myself. And in the program that I worked in for wilderness therapy, they actually didn't even let you share contact information unless the therapist approved of it. And when I was working that program, I was like, that's terrible. All of my closest friends are the people that I met in this program. In retrospect, it probably would have been very positive if I didn't have most of those contacts. And leaving those relationships where they were and saying thank you. I love you, but that's enough, would have been very supportive for my long-term mental health.
Yeah. Beautiful. So write any questions or comments in the chat below.
Yeah.
We would love to hear from you.
I'd love to know any other questions you have on the environment and the experience and what I learned. Yeah, whatever questions you have, I'm happy to answer any of those. Yeah, stay tuned, because one of the things that I didn't know when I got to wilderness therapy was that oftentimes there's transitional care. So you go from intensive inpatient, which is wilderness therapy, to intensive outpatient. And I didn't know. I thought I'd be done after the 3-month experience in open sky, but it turned out there was a whole another experience after that I eventually titrated to. So I'll be telling you more about that and what that experience is and the skills that I got out of that. And I'm really grateful to be able to share all of this information, because I'm extremely blessed in getting access to this quality of care. And this is part of the reason why I've gone down the path and who I've worked with, to make sure that people get the resources that they need to really heal.
Beautiful. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. I look forward to hearing everybody's questions. It's been really great talking about this. It was such a transformative experience for me.
Thank you.
Thanks.